Sometimes the most inspiring stories come from the most painful beginnings. Today, this is the story of a man whose journey can change how anyone sees life, a story of resilience, faith, and never giving up. Steve Harvey, now a global icon, once faced a road to success that was anything but easy. In the 90s, he lived in his car for 3 years, chasing a dream the world didn't yet believe in. He had no home, no money, but one unshakable belief. What would someone truly give up for their dream? Not just in theory, but in reality. When you close your eyes and picture the life you want, what are you willing to leave behind to make it happen? Would you trade comfort, security, even your pride, for just one shot at the life you want? Would you walk away from everything familiar, everything safe, just for a chance at something more? Most people love the idea of chasing a dream, but few are ready to pay the price it demands. Most say yes, but when things get tough, they fold. When the nights get long and the failures start to pile up, it's easier to quit than to keep going. The truth is, the path to a dream is littered with moments that test resolve. Dreams don't live in the safe zone, they live out there beyond the boundaries of comfort, in the places that scare us. They wait for someone to step out, to risk something real. Steve Harvey faced that test. He looked in the mirror and asked himself, how much do I want this? What am I willing to endure? He wanted to make people laugh. That was his gift. It was the one thing that made him feel alive, the one thing he knew he was born to do. But a gift means nothing if it's kept hidden. If it's never shared, if you never risk failure, it's just a secret you keep from the world, and from yourself. Steve Harvey chose to be a comedian, armed with nothing but faith and desire. He left behind stability, a steady paycheck, and the comfort of knowing what tomorrow would bring. That faith was tested. He lost his job, his home, his comfort. There were nights when he wondered if he'd made a terrible mistake, if he'd given up too much for a dream that might never come true. People called him crazy. They told him to get real, to give up and settle down. They couldn't see the vision he had, and they didn't understand the fire that kept him going. But their reality wasn't his. Steve Harvey knew that if he listened to their doubts, he'd never forgive himself. He had to walk his own path, even if it meant walking alone. He chose his dream, and it led him to living in his car for 3 years. Every night, he'd look up at the ceiling and remind himself why he started. He learned what it meant to sacrifice, to keep going when everything in him wanted to quit. So what are you willing to sacrifice? Are you willing to let go of comfort, to face uncertainty, to risk being misunderstood or even ridiculed? Every dream has a price: sweat, tears, sleepless nights, maybe even friends. You might lose things you thought you couldn't live without, but every sacrifice is a step closer to the life you want. But regret costs more than any dream ever will. The pain of wondering what if is heavier than any burden you'll carry on the road to your dream. The price must be paid up front. There are no shortcuts, no easy ways out. Every champion, every success story is built on sacrifice and persistence. Be willing to look foolish, to be uncomfortable. Growth only happens when you're willing to step into the unknown, to risk embarrassment, to fail, and try again. Because on the other side of discomfort is everything you want. The life you dream of is waiting for you to be brave enough to claim it. From the front seat of his car, Steve Harvey woke up every morning with nothing but hope and determination. That was enough to keep him moving forward. The world doubted him, but he refused to doubt himself. He became his own biggest believer, his own source of strength. The price was high, but the reward was higher. When he finally reached his dream, every sacrifice made sense. Every hardship became a badge of honor. One phone call, and everything changed. He went from cleaning up in gas station bathrooms to hosting Miss Universe. So what are you willing to give up? Your dream is waiting. The only question is, are you ready to pay the price and step into the life you were meant to live? For 3 long years, Steve Harvey's address wasn't a house or an apartment. It was a 1986 Ford Tempo, parked wherever he could find a spot that felt safe enough to close his eyes. His entire life was packed into that car. A battered cooler served as his fridge, keeping a few essentials cold, and a single suitcase held all the clothes he owned. His makeshift closet. Every inch of space mattered. Every item had a purpose. Steve became an expert at finding quiet side streets and empty parking lots. Always on the lookout for a place to rest without drawing attention. Each night was a gamble, and every morning was a small victory. People see the suits and the confidence now, but they don't see the nights he shivered in the dark, wrapped in every layer he owned, praying for sunrise to bring a little warmth and hope. He learned to wash up in gas station sinks, splashing cold water on his face before work. He even joined a local swim club, not for the exercise but just for the luxury of a hot shower and a moment of normalcy. That's a different level of broke. When the wallet is empty, the fridge is a cooler with nothing in it, and every coin is counted just to get by. Some days Steve managed to eat a meal in the driver's seat. Other days he went to bed hungry, stomach growling, telling himself tomorrow would be better. He was hungry, tired, and lonely most nights. But deep down, he refused to let those hardships break him. He clung to a stubborn sense of hope. Every single day was a battle, against hunger, against the biting cold that crept in through the car windows, and against that relentless voice in his head telling him to give up, to quit, to accept defeat. But there was another voice too, a quiet whisper of faith, reminding him to keep going, to hold on just a little longer, to believe that things could change. Living in that car stripped away Steve's ego and forced him to confront who he really was. It taught him humility in ways he never expected. There's no room for pride when you're washing up in a public bathroom hoping no one notices how long you linger at the sink. But those years also taught Steve something else: resilience. He learned to stand tall, even when the world felt like it was pressing down on him. As long as he had breath in his lungs and a dream in his heart, Steve knew he could handle anything life threw at him. His dreams became his fuel. That car wasn't just a shelter from the elements, it was Steve's training ground, the place where he learned what he was truly made of. It was the University of Hard Knocks, where every challenge was a lesson and every setback was a test of his willpower. Steve Harvey was earning a PhD in perseverance, one sleepless night at a time. Those years didn't just shape him, they forged him. They made him unbreakable, and he carries those lessons with him every single day. Stand-up comedy is brutal. Steve Harvey drove hundreds of miles for gigs that barely paid for gas. Sometimes he performed for just 5 people in a smoky bar. Silence was the loudest sound he heard. Rejection was his only fan. Booze, club owners saying he wasn't funny, people telling him to quit. For every laugh, there were 10 blank stares. It's easy to believe the critics, but Steve chose to believe in his gift. He held on to faith, kept writing, kept performing, kept moving. He was broke, living on spare change, sometimes siphoning gas just to get to the next gig. But his circumstances didn't define him. Steve Harvey was a comedian, a child of God with a purpose. The grind is where character is built. It's not glamorous, but it's necessary. Every no became fuel. Every empty room was practice. Every failure was a lesson. He was sharpening his sword for a battle he didn't know was coming. The world sees the success, not the grind. But the grind is what makes a person. That's where Steve Harvey found out who he really was. After years of relentless struggle, Steve Harvey reached his breaking point. In a rundown hotel bathroom, down to his last dollars, he told God he was finished. Then, the phone rang. Showtime at the Apollo was calling for him. The Apollo Theater was the ultimate test for any performer. If someone could make it there, they could make it anywhere. Steve drove to New York, his heart pounding with anticipation. This was the opportunity he had sacrificed everything for. He walked onto that legendary stage, lights blinding, the crowd buzzing with energy. Steve was nervous, but he was ready. All those empty rooms and years of rejection had prepared him for this moment. He gave the audience everything, his pain, his struggle, his hope, and they loved it. The crowd went wild. In that moment, everything changed for Steve Harvey. Years of sleeping in his car and facing rejection suddenly made sense. That performance became the turning point in his life. It didn't solve everything overnight, but it opened the door to new possibilities. It was the validation he had desperately needed. It was as if God was saying, "I heard you, now it's your time." Steve Harvey's journey had led him here. At Steve Harvey's lowest point, the greatest opportunity appeared. That was no coincidence. Often a person's lowest moment becomes the setup for their breakthrough. When someone is empty, they are ready to be filled with something new. Many find themselves at the end of their rope, ready to give up, just as Steve once did. But what if that moment is just the setup? Most people quit right before the miracle happens. Don't let that be your story. The darkness is always deepest before the dawn. Pain has a purpose, struggle is preparation. Steve's years spent in that car were not wasted. They became his education. Those hardships built the character he needed for success. Don't quit. The breakthrough is on its way. The setup is already in progress. The Apollo was the spark, not the whole fire. That legendary stage in Harlem was where Steve Harvey first felt the electricity of possibility. But it was only the beginning. The applause, the lights, the energy, they ignited something within him, but he knew he had to keep moving forward, building on that moment. That opportunity led Steve to a job hosting a television show, a huge step up from where he started. Suddenly, he was in front of cameras, connecting with audiences in a whole new way. It was a dream realized, but it also brought new challenges and responsibilities. For the first time in his life, Steve had a steady paycheck and a place to call his own. No more sleeping in cars or wondering where his next meal would come from. That sense of security was something he had never known before, and he cherished every moment of it. But success isn't a destination, it's a ladder climbed one rung at a time. Each step brought Steve new lessons, new obstacles, and new opportunities. There were no shortcuts, and comfort was never an option. The Apollo gave him visibility, but Steve had to keep climbing, pushing himself beyond what he thought was possible. Every stage, every show, became another chance to grow. He went on to create his own sitcom, The Steve Harvey Show. Taking that leap of faith allowed him to tell stories that mattered and bring laughter into living rooms across the country. Steve became an actor, a producer, and learned the business from the inside out. He built a brand, made bold decisions, and took risks that would shape his future. Every role, every script, every late night at the office was an investment in his dream. Then came movies, stand-up specials, and radio. Each new venture stretched him, forced him to adapt, and taught him something new about himself and the world. Each step was bigger than the last, but Steve never forgot those nights sleeping in his car, wondering if he would ever make it. That memory remained a constant reminder of how far he had come. That memory kept him humble and grounded no matter how high he climbed. It reminded him to appreciate every blessing and never take anything for granted. Then came the books, Act Like a Lady, Think Like a Man. Writing those words became a new way for Steve to reach people, sharing the lessons life had taught him. Many were surprised to see Steve as an author, but he was simply sharing life lessons, hoping to help others avoid the mistakes he had made and find their own path to happiness. The book became a bestseller, then a movie, revealing that Steve's purpose was bigger than just telling jokes. He could inspire, motivate, and change lives. His platform grew into something more, about helping people, inspiring change, and giving back to the community that supported him. And then, Family Feud, one of Steve's greatest joys. Bringing laughter and joy to families across the country day after day became a blessing he never took lightly. Through it all, Steve stayed true to the man in that car. He never let success change his values or his gratitude for the journey. He never took success for granted. The journey made him. The struggle shaped him. Every hardship, every setback, became a lesson that made the victory sweeter. The blessing is in the climb. It's not just about reaching the top. It's about who you become along the way, and the lives you touch as you rise. Steve Harvey's journey distilled into three powerful truths. First, he believed in himself when nobody else did. The world called him crazy, but he refused to let their fear become his reality. His vision always overpowered doubt. Second, tough times never lasted, but Steve's toughness did. No storm was forever. His struggle was only temporary. He was resilient, rising every time life knocked him down. Third, a delay was never a denial. Just because his dream hadn't happened yet didn't mean it wouldn't. God's timing was never his own. Steve longed for success in his 20s, but it arrived in his 30s. The delay became his preparation. He learned patience, trusted the process, and used the time to grow stronger. These three lessons, belief, toughness, and patience, became the foundation of everything Steve Harvey achieved. Simple in words, but difficult to live by. Yet, they carried him through the darkest nights. For those who live by them, there is nothing that cannot be overcome. That is Steve Harvey's real secret. No one goes through fire and emerges unchanged. Steve Harvey's pain was never just his own, it became wisdom he could use to help others. His journey gave him a testimony meant to be shared, not hidden away. Today his purpose is to give hope, to mentor, and to lift others up. That's why Steve founded his own organization, working with young people facing tough odds. He sees himself in them, and strives to show that anything is possible. Every time he speaks or hosts, Steve turns his pain into power for someone else. He openly discusses his failures, his homelessness, and his mistakes. Steve's story proves that perfection isn't required for success, only persistence. Scars are proof of survival. Giving back for him is not just about money, it's about time, wisdom, and heart. It's about saying you are seen, you are understood, you can make it. The true reward lies in making a difference. This is how pain is transformed into legacy. This is how struggle is made to matter. This is the story of a man and his dream. Faced with a choice, he had to decide what to do with it. Would fear hold him back, or would he take a leap of faith? The journey was uphill, filled with obstacles at every turn. There were days when quitting seemed easier. But he always remembered why he began. He held tightly to his vision. With unwavering faith, believing even when there was no evidence, he pressed on. His dream carried a purpose greater than himself, yet nothing would change unless he took that first step. He endured his own Ford Tempo moment, nights spent in a car, holding on to hope. Through it all, the person he became mattered more than the dream itself. He never gave up, knowing his time would come. The world needed his gift. He refused to let his music die inside him. In the end, he claimed what was his, because his dream was waiting. This is not just Steve's story, it's a message for anyone who feels like giving up. Your journey isn't over, it may just be beginning. Want more powerful stories like this one? Subscribe to Risevo and never miss the inspiration your heart needs.